without further ado, I hand you over to the lovely Katrina Crowe, who's the curator of the first Thought Talks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. And we're here for something that is both very serious and delightfully frivolous in other ways at the same time: food. Now, Gerry Godley was here before, and some of you may have been at his previous manifestation. He used to be known as Bread Man Walking. The Bread Man Walking part has gone away for the moment, but it may return. There's the possibility of a new bakery happening in the future. When he came the last time, every member of the audience got a piece of delicious bread and a little bag of organic flour, which he milled on the stage. I mean, it was the most electrifying thing, while telling us the history of food, bread, from the beginning of time up to last week. I mean, he was just extraordinary. So he's back this year with us to talk about Irish food in all its glorious and not so glorious varieties. And he's joined by these two wonderful women here, Professor Norah Campbell of Trinity College Dublin and Ruth Hegarty, lecturer at University College Cork, experts on food policy and development, and there will be grub for the audience again. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's a surprise. It won't be ultra-processed food, although that will be discussed in the course of the session. So please welcome Gerry Godley, Norah Campbell, and Ruth Hegarty.
Here we go. Thank you very much, Katrina. Yeah, I'm back, and I've brought reinforcements this time. These two exceptional thinkers around everything from food policy and food systems to our behaviours around food. And so at the end, there's a little kind of Irish summertime treat. That's your incentive to stay till the end. But right now, actually, we're going to lock the exits. So this is like a hostage situation, and we're going to bludgeon you for about the next 40 minutes with our critique of pretty much the state of Irish food, and from a kind of systems point of view. So the three of us will spend about 40 minutes or so doing that, and then we're going to open it up for what I anticipate will be a very lively discussion with your insights, your feelings, your emotions, your challenges as they arise. And then, all going according to plan, we'll bring it back to a kind of solutions-focused discussion towards the end. And make no mistake, there's going to be some hard questions over the next hour. There's going to be some real red meat. So here's a soft one as our amuse-bouche, as it were. So what's the best thing you've ever eaten? Now, how do you do that justice? How do you select a winner from the 80 million calories we ingest over a lifetime when you can't remember last night's tea? Actually, for tea last night, we went to Doe Brothers and we had a great pizza. But why would you even bother doing that other than to submit to the contemporary scourge, so beloved of influencer culture, of ranking everything that moves? Now, you know the drill. Tipperary hurlers, Irish craft bakeries, Galway pubs, Dublin pizza slices, ranked. You have to rank everything. So I'm about 60 million calories, I think, into my lifelong allocation. And honestly, I've forgotten more dinners than I've had actual hot dinners. But a few encounters have taken up kind of permanent residence in my hippocampus, quizzed up in the memory Nutri-Bullet with place and people and texture, aroma, colour, weather, all of these things. Proust had his Madeleines, and I have a tea time bag of chips in Selbridge 15 years ago, prior to a performance by the wonderful Scottish folk singer Julie Fowlis. She was playing in the local library. Now, childhood memory convinced me that Selbridge was kind of expeditionary, but actually progress and bus lanes have made the world smaller, and these days Selbridge is about 20 minutes from the centre of Dublin where I live. So I'm early for once and I've time to kill, and I walked the main street of Selbridge and made a recce of that evening's casual dining offer. So that was 2 chippers and a spar deli counter. Now the latter's array of beige items long deceased under the harsh glare of infrared lamps did not excite, so the chipper it was going to be, but which of the two? Chipper 1 was a bit of a tumbleweed situation, sort of exuded resentment at its lot in life. So I ambled over to chipper number 2, which was a much more attractive proposition. It was bright, buzzy, teeming with euphoric Selbridgians making these like impressive purchases of the family tea and a 2 litre of Fanta, the wisdom of which we might contest a bit later. But right now I stand in defence of the chipper, and these chips were magnificent. Late summer potatoes at their peak, twice submitted to the hot oil, Maillard action imparting this lovely bronzed bodice that sort of gave way to this lovely silky puree. It was like each chip was its own individual souffle. The salt and vinegar had been dispensed with this kind of casual mastery on the dangerous cusp of excess, which is, in my book, right where it should be. Now this perfection demanded a drinks pairing, so I made my way back to Spar and I secured a styrofoam cup of their finest hot water and a dangly tea bag. But where to consume this pauper's feast fit for the Earl of Kildare? So the Liffey burbles its way through well-appointed Selbridge and right past my Michelin star chipper. And mindful of A.A. Gill's dictum that eating chips is a race against time, I hastened to a riverbank bench with my hot tea and very hot chips, too hot in fact. So I ate them with my best sucking technique to cool their passage through my oral cavity, like, you know, that thing. So each chip was better than the one before, which is an effect known as hedonic escalation. And I scarfed them right down to the scabby little shards soused in a pool of vinegar at the bottom of the bag. And this was like a small moment of nirvana, you know, a centrist dad and his single of chips at the still point of the turning world. Everything was like in this perfect momentary alignment, you know, the spuds, the seasoning, the tea, the seating, the river air, the beautiful music I was anticipating later, and my own solitude. And then, poof, you know, they were gone. They were gone, but they left something indelible, and food can do this to us, and you will have your own bag of chips, right? Now, I hate that word foodie, but I concede that I'm talking like one, and increasingly I'm shaped like one. But when I'm not, you know, cooking it and eating it, I'm reading and writing about it, and usually I'm cooking to avoid the writing. And I'm forever chasing something transient and perishable with food, you know, satiety, novelty, balance, a bargain. I love a bargain. So it's constantly on my mind and in my hands and in my mouth. I'm foraging, I'm provisioning, I'm hoarding, I'm preparing, I'm scheming, I'm salivating, I'm coveting what you're eating. I'm smelling it, I'm squeezing it, I'm discovering, I'm waiting for it, I'm surrendering, I'm metabolizing, and I'm defecating. So it's immersive and all-consuming. It's a boulder that never reaches the summit because the anxious hunger engine that motivates all creatures is always running in the background. And this is a perpetual negotiation that starts with breakfast and ends with dinner all my days, from the moment my chubby infant fingers grabbed their first rusk till the day I no longer have the cognitive and motor skill to hold my own knife and fork. It's my life, it's yours, and the other 8 billion souls with whom we compete for the precarious resources of this biosphere. And it is life itself, and I'm sorry, I know that's a really depleted cliche, and I'm sorry for bringing it up, but it really is the most important thing. And we've been living in times of, you know, unprecedented plenty, and we have become complacent about it. And we're blessed to have so much of it on our little island, I think. I mean, what joy that is. You know, the milk, the butter, the beef, the soda bread, the seaweed, the mackerel, the Clarenbridge oysters up the road, like whatever you're having yourself, like all of these good things. And right now, the world is full of problems, we know, you know, each one more wicked than the next. And I won't enumerate them here for fear of a stampede for the exits, but food, like the little treat we'll have afterwards, that's our respite from all of that, isn't it? And perhaps that's why we call it goodness, you know. But the food system, the infinite web of interactions between nature and us that gets it out of the ground and into our mouths, that might be the most wicked problem of all of them. Now, the FAO, that's the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, they go a bit further, and they say a sustainable food system is one that delivers security and nutrition for all in such a way that the economic, social, and environmental bases to generate food for this and future generations are not compromised. Now, that is a challenge. But like, surely that's other people's problem, right? I mean, aren't we the food island producing so much we can export 90% of the stuff, enough to feed 25 million? Doesn't our dairy have the lowest carbon footprint anywhere? Isn't our grass-fed beef the envy of the world? Are we not friend to nursing mothers everywhere with our milk formula? 14% of total global output. Is our countryside not pristine under the stewardship of the mythical Irish farm family? Are our supply chains not the very model of farm-to-fork sustainability? Does our tourism offer not depict a pastoral landscape of rugged abundance and beauty? Haven't we come a long way since that unpleasantness in the 1840s that we don't talk about so much? Not to mention the privations of our parents' generation. Whisper it, don't we have a food culture now? Don't we jabber about it constantly on telly, on the radio, the socials, the watercolour, the supplement in the Sunday paper? Haven't we the yellow bittern putting manners on them over in that London? Haven't we our own celebrity chefs as good as anything over there? Food festivals and farmers markets in every corner of the 4 green fields. Sure, isn't Instagram only coming down with plucky Irish food entrepreneurs, myself included? Have we not dragged ourselves out of the abyss of hairy bacon and sulphurous cabbage water to take our rightful place at the table of European gastronomy? Sure, haven't we even taken to the cosmopolitan sourdough with the world's best condiment to slather on it, the butter? Oh, the butter. The Kerry Gold and the horse taken to France and Sir Tony O'Reilly and the way he might look at you. Now, listen, some of that is whimsy, right? But it's mostly true in a sort of Board Bia, Fáilte Ireland, IFA, ICMSA, Teagasc, IBECI kind of way, right? But you won't be surprised to learn that me and this pair of malcontents, we're not quite drinking the official Ireland Kool-Aid on this. Because it's equally true that the Irish food system is in crisis. Now, the specifics of which Ruth and Norah will interrogate with far greater rigour than I can summon. But here's the brushstrokes that we know, right? It's a disaster for the environment. Highest methane emissions in Europe, eutrophication of our rivers, biodiversity, habitat loss, consequences of the ruminant monoculture that has pretty much overwhelmed our food production system to the detriment of all else, especially horticulture, which is in terminal decline. So just 1.6% of Irish farmland now devoted to the vegetables we simply must eat more of. And that is not helped by our supermarkets kind of cynically killing off the last domestic growers standing in one sad 49-cent promotional bag of carrots at a time. And for something so precious, we waste an awful lot of it through household waste, spoiled food, packaging and so forth. 162 kilos per person, those are figures just out from the EPA, and that's significantly higher than the EU average. And nor are we particularly resilient, though The Economist, which rates us second after Finland in their Global Food Security Index, would have you believe otherwise. Now, Ruth, if she's so minded, can speak to that with authority, but I can tell you it's a subject that greatly exercises people in the baking community I'm part of, given we are pretty much entirely reliant on imports for the 5 million loaves of bread Ireland eats every week. And increasingly, our food is making us very unwell, and that's the terrain Norah will bring us into. The modern scourge of UPF, our epidemic of overnutrition, obesity, and all the mortality that follows in its wake, poor life outcomes, lost productivity, the impacts on the health system, and it goes on. And there are loads more layers to that particular onion. Inequality, exploitation, protectionism, bad actors, bad law, bad politics, the perils for small indigenous business, the hegemony of huge transnational ones, the visible impacts on our communities, the hidden impacts on even poorer communities on the other side of the world. And for a long time, its saving grace was that it was cheap, but even that doesn't really fly anymore, does it? So my closing morsel is that if we do have a national food conversation, it's actually mostly frivolous, right? And it's missing the wood for the trees. And we also confuse the robust debate about the future of agriculture for food policy. But actually, agriculture and food policy are different things, right? We are ruthlessly good at one of those, and we're strangely mute on the other. Now, our agribusiness titans like Ornua, Glanbia, and ABP, they are laser focused on the world's great export markets. And though I think they'd be too polite to say it, I think the domestic market is kind of small beer for them. And and when it comes to the citizens' food interest, all of us, they are conspicuously absent from the debate. And they just leave overburdened consumers and beleaguered farmers to just squabble over the leftovers. But like, given its systemic importance, right, its indivisibility from the totems of citizenship like housing, transport, health, and education, like surely this is in the foreground of our political apparatus. But in policy terms, it is not so, right? There is erratic noise from government buildings, but there's no coherent signal. It's a hygiene issue, literally and metaphorically. It has a ministry, but it usually seems preoccupied by matters bovine. So it's a case of kind of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, right? So food, this critical substance that we put into our bodies, seems disembodied from the body politic. And in its place, a kind of quasi-regulated anarcho-capitalism prevails, right? And maybe, maybe who can blame them? Like, I mean, food is hard, right? It's slippery, it's complex, it can be very polarizing. But in the great existential challenge coming our way, it is both the wicked problem and potentially the transformative solution. And there is a very, very vigorous global debate going on around that. And if we truly are the food island, we absolutely have to be part of it. But right now, don't go looking for meaningful food policy for Ireland, because there is no there. So maybe we don't love food so much after all. Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll like I say, we really want to open this up, because I think all of this stuff is like food is a continuum, that we're all on throughout our lives, and often there are no kind of right answers. So we really want to open it up to a vigorous discussion. But now I'm going to pass the conch to Ruth, who is already sleep deprived, by the way, because she was up at the crack of dawn to do Countrywide to talk about the Common Agricultural Policy this morning. So Ruth, over to you.
I promise not to talk about the Common Agricultural Policy now. No one wants to hear about that. But yeah, Gerry has, in his very unique, poetical and lyrical way, set out some of the things that are really wonderful about food and why we're so enthralled to it, and I'm sure that most people here are, and some of the unique joys of Irish food. But he's also provided some of the stark reality of many of the issues that the food system that we all kind of reside within presents, a plethora of negative impacts on health, environment, and society. And as much as we might paint a pretty picture, what we're producing and what the majority of us are eating is making us and our environment sick. So how can we fix all this? Food education, right? I have been working in this sphere for 20 years, and I have been going to various fora. I've been parts of so many different discussions, as have Gerry and Norah, I'm sure. And for 20 years, I have heard at nearly every one of those discussions the conclusion being, we need more food education. We need more education. People need cookery skills. People need to understand where their food is coming from. People need to know what's good for them. I have run food workshops in schools. I've advocated for food education. It has a role to play. The other solution is we can vote with our forks. You can vote with your fork. The decisions that you make about what you put in your shopping basket shape the food system, right? So you should try to buy organic, maybe shop in a farmer's market, buy direct from farmers, buy less but better meat. The food industry is just responding to what you demand and what you pay for. So we need to make better choices, be more informed, have more willpower. Well, as Gerry so eloquently depicted, food is really complex and the food system is complicated. Our relationship with food is full of complication and contradiction. And there's so many different dimensions to food and the system of food that we're dealing with. It interacts with and impacts on our health, our environment, society, politics, and the economy. But at a policy level in Ireland, I would argue, food is primarily viewed through the economic lens. It is an economic commodity. And if food is an economic commodity, above all else, then your role and your stake in the food system is as a consumer. Valued for your spending power, someone to be sold to, manipulated, and bombarded with choice. So how much control do we really have over what we eat? And is there another way that we can frame ourselves and our role within this behemoth of a system that we're part of? Another way to take some control. Well, I want to share 3 stories that I think illustrate how hard it can be to make the right choice within the food system we live in, why we may not have as much control as we think, and why the proposed solutions, like food education, like voting with your fork, maybe are not so straightforward, and that maybe even play right into the hands of big food, the food industry, who want to protect the status quo. The first story is about lived experience of the food system, and it's a little bit of a personal story. The other 2 are about policy, but bear with me, I hope it won't be too boring. It's a little bit about how policy is formed and what our kind of national approach and attitude to food is at the policy table. So the first kind of personal and, as I said, lived experience story. My entire career, as you'll have gathered already, has involved working on, thinking about, writing about food systems, hospitality, and food policy. I live out in the countryside in Galway. I have my own house, I have a garden, I grow a bit of food, have done a lot in the past, not so successfully at the moment. I used to make sourdough bread every weekend. I get my kicks from making elderflower cordial and blackcurrant jam from the blackcurrants I pick from my garden. Some of my friends are in the audience, so they'll know that. That's the kind of, the things that they get as Christmas presents. But for the last 3 years, I have been a single mother to my wonderful 3 children. And I'm self-employed, even though I was introduced as a lecturer in ECC, I actually just lectured part-time 1 module in ECC, I'm self-employed. And, I'm a self-employed single mother, but a privileged one for all the reasons that I've mentioned. But despite that privilege, I struggle day to day with the relentlessness and the weight of trying to feed my children well. And a huge part of that weight is literally just thinking, what are we going to have for dinner today? And I actually, 2 of my children went off to my sister this week, and my eldest wonderfully stayed with my wonderful mother for a few days, and I didn't cook dinner any day this week. I love food, I adore cooking, but the relief of not having to make dinner was incredible. It's hard. And between the cost of living and the time element, I feel like I make a lot of bad decisions about what my children eat. And as they get older, I have less and less control of that as well. I feel guilty. I feel like a failure. I feel like I don't practice what I preach. And then, they went to school. They went to a school where sweets were sometimes used as rewards. There was Friday's treat day. They go on school tours and to birthday parties where the food is almost always Supermax. They're exposed to advertising and social media where junk food is constantly fetishized. And despite childhoods where they were exposed to great food and lots of cooking, my kids make crap decisions about what they eat. My fabulous eldest daughter, who's in the audience, and who earns her own money working in one of the best restaurants in Galway, loves supermarket meal deals. She's going to kill me. And why wouldn't she? You can get a sandwich or a wrap, highly processed, crisps, and a fizzy drink for $3.99. Our lunch meal deal is a steal, says Tesco. They're stealing something else as well, your health. She knows and appreciates good food, but she also wants to eat Doritos and instant noodles. Okay, but I have all of the privilege that I set out. Now, imagine this mother that I met when I was running a workshop a few years ago in Duishka. She lives in a suburban apartment. She has 3 teenage children. She works 2 jobs, 6 days a week, and she's still on a low income. Her teenagers are health conscious but hungry. She doesn't have a car. She spends the 1 day off that she has a week doing her grocery shopping, using public transport and the supermarket special offers section from the Galway Advertiser. She goes around to all of the various supermarkets to try and stretch her budget as far as possible. She wants to feed her children as healthy as possible. but she can never keep enough food in the fridge. She has a very limited budget. The special offers are usually highly processed, and anyway, she has very little time to cook. She told me she ends up constantly feeling that she's letting them down. So, does she get to vote with her fork? Voting with your fork actually means voting with your wallet. What about those that don't have that privilege? Is she not informed or educated enough? Does she need to know more about nutrition? Does she need cooking lessons? Do her teenagers just need to be more connected to where their food comes from? Do they not have enough willpower? The fact is that the food environments and the society that we live in make good decisions almost impossible sometimes, and especially for young people who are particularly targeted by junk food companies. So who really decides what our food environments look like? And who drives policy around them? Who influences the values that our food system is based on? Who's at the table when policy is made? That brings me to my second story, which is about policy, but bear with me. As Gerry said, we don't have any coherent food policy to speak of in Ireland. We've, of course, lots of policy related to food, but no overall vision around what we want from our food system. What about Food Vision 2030, you may ask? Most of you probably won't ask that because you probably haven't heard of it. But the Food Vision 2030 is the government's 10-year strategy for Ireland to be a world leader in sustainable food systems. And it's part of a series of strategies that the government creates about every 10 years for food and agriculture. And the person who led its development this time round called it a national food strategy, although it's more rightly described as an agri-food industry strategy. And it's really a good example of who dictates policy and how we see that as entirely normal and acceptable. So it's essentially a vision to grow agri-food exports. And it was created by one government department, the Department of Agriculture, and a 32-person committee. That committee gave one seat for environmental NGOs. The rest, state bodies, industry representatives, and farm organisations. The environmental pillar that had that one seat represents 30 environmental organisations. Business group IBEC had 5 seats on that committee, representing 5 of their sectoral groups. In the end, the environmental pillar actually pulled out of that committee when the draft strategy was published, because they believed it represented business as usual, didn't protect the environment, and didn't take on board their concerns. But the strategy went ahead. Did any of you input into that strategy? None of you. Oh, because you could have. There was an opportunity online for participants, for citizens to take part in a consultation and give their opinions. So that box was ticked. And I researched it and I went through the submissions from the public, and then I went through the draft strategy and the final strategy. There was no evidence that any of the input from citizens was taken into account. Food Vision 2030, as you said, is part of a series of strategies that are created by the government on a regular kind of cycle. And its predecessor, the predecessor to this particular strategy, was proudly described by the CEO of Bord Bia as industry-owned. The stakeholders, therefore, as far as our government are concerned in the vision for our food, are the food industry. Where does that approach to policy lead us? That brings me on to my third and final story. Where it leads us, I think, is to what we have now in our current school meals programme. Does anyone here have children in primary school or maybe grandchildren in primary school? Yeah, so you'll all be familiar with the fact that we're now entering, we'll be entering a new school year where for the very first time every primary school in the country will be eligible to receive free hot school meals for all their pupils. Universal free school meals is a policy that most countries can only dream of. And it's something, unfortunately, I would argue that our government has got very, very wrong, albeit maybe with good intentions. But a policy that's illustrative of government and maybe general attitudes to food and a really neoliberal, classical neoliberal approach to food. It's a food poverty measure. It's supposed to reduce health inequalities. But the attitude is, they're fed. That's enough. So what's wrong with it? Well, very briefly, The setup is that individual meals come into schools in disposable packaging, prepared off-site, mostly with the cheapest ingredients that can possibly be sourced, often very highly processed, handed out to children at their desk to be eaten as quickly as possible before they go out to play. The budget, their own estimation to roll this out to every school, is $1/3 billion of public money annually, generating vast food and packaging waste, 100 million single-use containers a year by my calculation, potentially damaging children's health, and returning little or no benefit to Irish farmers or local economies because it's based on cheap imported ingredients. And as far as we can decipher from the research that we've done, the Department of Social Protection asked nobody for advice, didn't look at international examples, didn't speak to many of the incredible experts, both at home and abroad, around how to do school meal programs well. They may, however, have received advice from companies, from school meal providers. A newspaper article in The Independent about the growth and success of one particular school meal provider, a company in Neenah called the Lunch Bag, who are now the largest hot school meal provider in the country, said, and I quote, "The success created an environment whereby Lunch Bag could discuss with government how to roll out school meal services for all. A government report 2 years ago in which Lunch Bag was heavily involved set the course for Minister Heather Humphreys to make the announcement of free school meals for all by 2030. And the original target was 2030, but it'll happen this year. Like, have you ever heard of any government policy that happened 5 years ahead of time? So was the model, the solution, essentially provided by private companies, by the people who were going to gain most from this economically? We're left with the school meals programme that essentially institutionalises industrial food in a neoliberal masterstroke that Margaret Thatcher would be proud of, leaves the solution entirely to the market and moves public money into private hands, allowing a race to the bottom on quality and a race to make as much profit as possible from the meagre $3.20 per meal the government has allocated. And so we tell children one thing, eat more veg, while doing another, feeding them meals mostly based on refined carbohydrates. How does food education compete with that? School meals could potentially be transformational, something that could maybe present the biggest opportunity we have to shift, even transform the Irish food system. Somewhere we might look to for hope and an opportunity for change, but not as it is right now. So I leave you with these questions to ponder. Whose voices really shape our food system? What values shape it? What does that mean for the outcomes it produces? Who gets to decide? What powers are at play? We all have some form of power. Does your power lie in being a consumer, or could you use your power differently? And I think what Norah has to say next will give you a lot more to chew on.
Clicker not cooperating.
Make this work. Yeah, brilliant. So close your eyes, dear listener, for me for a second, and produce in your head a vision that goes with the words, what is bad food in Ireland? So if you just close your eyes for a second and think, close your eyes, Gerry, what is bad food in Ireland? And most of us will probably end up with an image like this or a picture like this where we see kind of, this is our problem here. We have kind of heavy, really aggressive marketing, packaging, retailing of junk food. The vulnerable kind of person in this is the child who needs to be, as Ruth said, in our last 30 years, educated with school education, resources. If I hear the word resources or support without actual examples, ever again, I'll go mad. And we need parents to row in and help with this effort. So yes, you would be right. Marketing has gotten ever more aggressive and sophisticated. We are in the middle of what is known as a neurological turn in marketing. So we are using neuroscience in order to map brain activities, especially emotional responses to food. We're in a data analytical turn in marketing, and especially food marketing, where we are leaving trails everywhere in the physical and digital environment that can be used in order to make agency and our own sense of personal agency and commercial agency begins here. So this is just an image from Link Retail and Accenture on digital heat mapping in supermarkets, for example. But these are all the kind of marketing, advertising, data analytics around food, and the activities around it are only the visible tip of the iceberg. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is explain to you the other commercial vectors that are producing the food system that we have in Ireland today. And you will start to see, when you see this range of commercial vectors, that going after, you know, more school supports and more education and Lunchables and all of these sort of adventures that we've had in food in Ireland is the equivalent of shaking a stick at a tidal wave. First thing I want to say is that we don't tax enough. We don't tax food conglomerates enough. So last year, Kerry Group paid 114 million in tax on an 8.8 billion revenue. That's an effective tax rate of 1.2%. Now, we know that taxation, both at the consumer level and at the conglomerate level, works. And there's evidence across the world that that works. But it's not very popular, especially among consumers, and it has been successfully demonized by industry. So the kind of sister strategy of taxation is subsidies. We have massive subsidization of unhealthy food in Ireland. We live in a corporate welfare state, I would say, or we meet the conditions for a corporate welfare state. So, for example, and all the examples that I'm going to show you today, none of these brands pay tax on their marketing and advertising in Ireland. So all of their marketing and advertising is tax deductible. So that's equivalent of taking money out of your pocket in order to advertise their products to your children and your grandchildren. We have had a phase shift in product innovation in this country and across the world. And the vast majority of work, research, and government funding goes in our food system goes into ultra processing. So in the 1990s, or up until the 1990s, we had just plain old processing of food in order to guarantee supply and for safety reasons. So fermenting, drying, freezing, tinning, etc. All of that is processing we needed. What happened in the 1990s was a range of particular molecular technologies, humectants, emulsifiers, caking agents, anti-caking agents, foaming agents, chalking agents, bleaching, colouring, flavouring, that created this real innovation, what's happening in food today, such that 60% of our food baskets is characterised by this type of food. Now, there's two reasons businesses go into ultra-processing. The first is to create what's known as hyper-palatable food. So what does hyper-palatable food mean? It means you are not using the processing techniques in order to guarantee safety and security of the supply chain. You're using it to stimulate repeat consumption. You use it to circumvent satiety, so the physical kind of conditions that we have to say I'm full, and you use it to activate brain reward pathways. And there's a pile of research going on, the Yale Addiction Lab in Yale University, on ultra-processing, and does it meet the threshold for addictive characteristics. So these companies use ultra-processing in order to mimic real ingredients. So if you're a Kerry Group, you know that cheese is a raw material and it's really expensive to get onto the plate. So the deepest profit pool for Kerry Group or any of our food ingredients groups is in processing, creating food or cheese flavorings, cheese powders, cheese concentrates, signature cheeses that get attached to these commodity products like puffs, straws, crackers, etc. This is where the deepest profit pool is, and that's why companies like Kerry Group go for that profit pool. And when we eat this stuff, it stimulates this overconsumption. So this is what food companies in this country actually do and what our state money goes into. So I was just looking at this particular report from Kerry Group from 2022, how consumer emotion is driving the cheese-flavoured snack market. And I was laughing. I put up the image because I don't know anyone who eats cheese snacks and drinking coffee as well, but this is what Kerry's research shows, that this is our emotional drive. So it's also shit research as well at the behavioural level. But this is what they're laser focused on. Now, from a health perspective, there is a debate at the moment of whether it is the combination of ingredients in food, saturated fat, salt, and sugar. Does that cause all of these health problems, or is it the processing itself? And the debate, and I think it needs a really high scientific threshold. I think that we are still having that debate. This is Melissa Lane from the British Medical Journal last year. And what I find really interesting, this was an umbrella study of all the studies that have been done on ultra-processing so far. And do they meet the criteria for this is convincing evidence that this is having negative health outcomes? The highest grade of evidence in this umbrella study is around mental health disorders that come from ultra-processed food. Not obesity, not heart disease, not dementia, not frailty, not all of these others which have a lower grade threshold. And I find that kind of really important to say. So the food industry lobbies in this country to make products, unhealthy products, as available as possible. I did a lot of work around the sugar tax in Ireland. So, you know, in 2018, there was sugar tax. There was a really strong lobby in the years coming up to it, and really sophisticated, especially with brands like Coca-Cola, that really leaned into this narrative everywhere on choice. So amplifying the discourse on choice. So you get this kind of, our approach is based on giving people choice and information about our products, enabling them to make the decisions that are right for themselves and their families. So you get this kind of stuff, but you also get faintly ridiculous stuff. This is Lucozade Suntory, which is a conglomerate based in Japan, but obviously it has a lot of product in this country. We recommend, and they lobbied for the exemption of sports drinks from this tax, because they're designed for elite performance and not for general refreshment. We have a revolving door government, or certainly a government that meets the threshold for a revolving door. That simply means that there's a lot of migration between people who hold political and senior civil servants positions and industry. And obviously, that's about 38% of them go back into industry, and that's totally normal, because if you're a TD or a councillor and you have to give up your job and go somewhere else for money, you're going to go back into the private sector if you've come from the private sector. But a full 11% of the revolving door of those politicians go back into corporate boards, consulting and lobbying, particularly in the food industry. So the food industry in this country is not just an economic might and a lobbying might, but it has what is known as hegemonic power. And hegemonic power, all the different ways in which our internal narrative is shaped by what food is. So the food industry, food conglomerates in this country have considerable reach into our curricula in Ireland. This is an example of Agri-Aware's Dig In programme, SPHE programme, which is funded entirely by the big agri-food business, and it teaches kids about where food comes from and sustainability. So on the surface, this is highly laudable, and this is, a partnership with one of our government departments. But it is, when you look in depth at this material, what you start to understand is that this material is actively discouraging young people from asking important questions such as corporate power and concentration and profitability within the food industry. It never, for example, would talk about the physical limits of nitrogen loading in the soil. And it's shaping a certain view and a certain identity around kind of food in Ireland. So from the 1990s or from the 1970s to today, you also see this change in the food industry from a kind of shady lobbyist kind of behind the scenes. That's our kind of mental model of what's going on around the food industry in Ireland. That doesn't exist anymore. Instead, we have this friendly collaborator, which is only too happy to help and lean in. So we have significant regulatory capture in this country of our institutions that are meant to be policing aspects of the food environment. Last year, the Advertising Standards Authority of Ireland formed a partnership with Commission Naman, our independent regulator for media. Commission Naman has a bill on online social media regulation, which we all counter-lobbied around it. A colleague of mine who works for, did research for Safe Food Ireland, and this is embargoed, but she said I could say it, in their research that came out of Galway as well, with like next generation frontier research in terms of methodology. So that on average, teenagers are exposed to 108 posts for food brands per hour online. That's huge, huge onslaught all the time. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the Advertising Standards Authority is some sort of regulatory institution in this country. It's not. It's a SAPRO, or a strategic sort of public relations organisation that is 100% funded by the advertising industry. And Commission Naman, because it's so underfunded, has allowed Advertising Standards Authority to self-regulate and police this, the online social media marketing to children. So food brands don't compete in taste markets as much as they compete in virtue markets. So the competition for the marketplace of virtue is what food companies do here in Ireland. So they use public relations to change the perception of products and industries, often using grassroots community initiatives to do so. They place significant press releases in our newspapers, in our radios, in our any education that we have about the food environment that we are in. And cash-strapped communities will often take this money. I often write about this idea of economic theology. Like, it's not my kind of, how would I ever know what the CEO of Coke or Kellogg sponsoring cool camps possibly, you know, is motivated by? I can't go into their heads and say you were a bad person. I have no evidence for that. So the evidence that we need to use, or the litmus test we need to use with any of these, is what is the fraction of the investment in these communities compared to their profits that are gained from the very communities. So for example, Cadbury in this country had a revenue of 282 million last year. They won't release the data around their program of funding women's football, but I can suspect it's a tiny fraction of it. The hope that I see everywhere in Ireland is that we are changing in our worldview. So we are approaching a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift is characterized by the knowledge that we are prepared to accept, the evidence base that we are prepared to accept, the categories of measurement that we are prepared to use, and the questions that we are prepared to ask. So what we're seeing is a shift, a profound shift that is happening everywhere. And I met a colleague here from the HSE where we're looking at alcohol from this kind of measure of overconsumption. And this is where we have to focus on, to the capacity problem that we have. We have a problem with overproduction. And this is the starting point, and this is what we have to be laser focused on from now on. So I hope I've left you with a taste of kind of understanding that this is only the visible tip of the iceberg, and there is a commercial engine, particularly non-market, so businesses to government engine that is working, that we have to get more literate on and start asking our politicians about. Thank you.
Whoa. Well, Norah. I did say they were really good, didn't I? When Norah said close your eyes, actually, the thing I visualized was I visualized Westmoreland Street in Dublin, which is, you know, in its pomp, it would have been a beautiful, handsome boulevard, but it's now what people refer to as a food swamp. You know, it's just every unit is a fast food outlet, and I noticed they've just granted planning consent for Popeyes, which is an American fried chicken joint, and they're going to open there because that's what Westmoreland Street really needs. It needs, you know, it needs another fried chicken joint, you know, and so like. I think what I was thinking about that was like, you know, okay, so our planning law, for example, you know, where does food, where does the citizen interest in food sit in terms of planning? You know, when the planning consent was being granted for that business, did anybody think, well, you know, how's that from a kind of nutritional point of view, or, you know, and actually it's also very kind of class driven, I think, because they wouldn't dream of giving them planning consent on Grafton Street, you know. We'll just create a sink down in Westmoreland Street, you know. So but look, we have now unburdened ourselves of our angst, and now it's your turn. So can we bring up the lights a bit, and if we have the guys with roving mics, and we really want to open it up now and get your perspectives. This lady here, in about midway up, second in.
Great.
Thank you, and thank you for a fabulous talk. And I can't be alone here and being highly stirred by what you've said. So if there's some place to sign up, I'm sure everybody will put up their hand. And I mean by that is, what do we do? Please don't tell me to go online. It's infuriating to hear how little influence we have. So, you know, I will certainly look you up individually, and I hope we all do, and people actually think, well, how can we actually take action? And I just want to share something here. We're talking about overproduction and all of that. In the supermarkets now, everything is getting bigger. You can't buy small bits of things. Everything. Crisps are in these massive bags. They're driving us into this. And you talked about packaging. So if everybody went out of here, I do it. When I go into Tesco, I take everything out of the packaging I can. I ask them, where's your cardboard recycling? They don't have it. I still leave it behind me. They have a place for plastic. We can start doing things. It's back to the consumer again. We're chastened, we're dumb, we're not making the right decisions, we're not recycling properly, we're not doing this properly. It's all done for the convenience of those that are making more and more profit of us consumers. We have to check ourselves out. There's no service. So start doing that and tell everybody you know, next time you go into Tesco, start leaving your stuff. And you're challenged on it and say, well, you're putting it in packaging so you can scan and make me scan it. And it's just, I think it has to be this kind of ground level stuff, because we can't rely on the policymakers, as you said, you know. And it's about influeing where we can in the real world. You know, that's all I wanted to say, but thank you. And
thank you. We'll harvest a few, right? So, I think the key bit there was, what do we do? So we need to talk about what do we do, but let's get a few more perspectives, and then we'll try and box them off together. So this lady in the front row in green.
Hi, I really enjoyed that, thank you. I'm a retired organic farmer. We converted in 1995, way ahead of the curve. And back then there was 1,100 certified organic farmers in Ireland. As we went into the 2020s, there was 1,400 certified organic farmers in Ireland. We now have over 6,000. Why? Because supports started coming in place. My issue is the complete disconnect between agriculture and food. So we're funding organic farmers, but we're not looking at what happens to the food they're producing. I think it's a perfect opportunity to use that food for our school meal system.
Yes.
It's an open goal as far as I'm concerned, because we actually don't have the market in this country for the level of organic food that's going to be produced. All these farms in the last 3 or 4 years who've gone organic are going to be producing more organic meat than can actually be processed here, because we don't have small abattoirs and we don't have the processing facilities for organic meat. I'm so passionate about this. I mean, I'm delighted that my children were reared on an organic farm, and I think every child should have that opportunity. And it should be cost effective by supporting the food that comes off our organic farms.
Thank you. And I think Ruth can correct me, but there are very stretching targets in Food Vision 2030 about percentage of land use in organic, and we've still got a long way to go, don't we?
Yeah, well, we trip.
Because that affects our carbon credits and everything else.
Yeah.
We're looking at the land use as a way of ticking boxes.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the food that you
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, nutrient density of the food and so
We
forth.
did, just in the past, since 2021, we've tripled the area of agricultural land that's being farmed organically, but we've tripled it from 1.6% to 5%. And we've been like the lowest in Europe for a long time. But maybe too quickly, because I know we want to take a few questions before we, but just on that, you know, in green public procurement guidelines now, there's a target for 10% sourcing in public food procurement contracts, 10% organic sourcing, sorry. But that's just something that's written on a piece of paper as a target. Like nobody is being mandated to do it. But the other thing is, as Margaret pointed out, is that you need to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Like you can't just, you know, try to get people to into the organic scheme and say that's great, they're producing organically. And you can't just put a target into organic procurement and think, oh, suddenly we're going to have 10% organic sourcing in procurement, because those farmers are not set up to sell into the catering sector, or they, you know, no one has put those supports in place, and the infrastructure isn't there. And like, for example, we're like just like the number of local abattoirs for meat processing is dwindling all the time. We're losing all of our local abattoirs. There's very few that are certified organic. So some farmers end up producing organically and having to sell into conventional markets because they can't get, you know, all of those things. So if, you know, we need to support local food systems through putting all of the infrastructure and you know, putting these pieces together.
I'm going to ask Norah to think about your question and particularly the supermarket piece, and what sort of goes on tactically to create this kind of idea. It's almost like original sin, you know. It's like, but it's not, as Norah I think will elaborate. That we are being manipulated into that position. But something really important just happened, which was a consumer spoke and then a farmer spoke, right? And I feel that is so much at the...
Citizen spoke, Gerry.
Citizen spoke, because we're all, you know, but that is so important because, you know, there's a fantastic American sort of poet farmer called Wendell Berry, and he says that all eating begins with an agricultural act, you know, and we lose sight of that. So I wonder, are there any other farmers in the room who this gentleman here in the second row? We'll bring a microphone to you. This gentleman here in the lovely plaid shirt, I have to say.
I was going to reference, you mentioned education, and we can see by my grey beard, I was born and bred on a farm in Herefordshire, and distinctly remember a young lad coming, leaning on the gate, looking at our cows and saying, "You don't get your milk from those dirty cows, do you? I get mine from a clean bottle." So education the lack of education has been going on for a long, long time. And I feel like there's a massive disconnect from understanding where the food comes from. Like I say, I feel very privileged. I grew up on a farm. I've visited abattoirs. I know exactly what goes on in these things. I suppose it's just amplifying your point of the importance of education, basically.
I was reflecting on this. I grew up going to the Spring Show in the RDS, which stopped in 1997, maybe even earlier. And it's such a shame because it used to bring agriculture right into the heart of the capital, you know. And like, I loved it. It was full of school kids, you know. And that's gone now, you know. And I think one of the things that happened, one of the things that stymies debate around this is that everything gets painted as a kind of binary, you know, consumers versus farmers, urban versus rural, agribusiness versus the small independent farmer, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, these binaries are sort of crude and unhelpful, I think. Is there another farmer voice before we talk about supermarkets again? This gentleman here, thank you, in the second row.
I was fortunate enough to be born in 1945. So most of the food on a farm, most of the food I ate, I'd say up until 1960, was essentially organic. even though there's no label on it. Now, the point I'm trying to make is there a chance that life expectancy is going to go down now because we're eating all these this processed food that's so harmful to us, and that my generation are the generation that will survive the longest, hopefully.
Yeah. You're your own little blue zone just over there. Your own blue zone, you know, with great life expectancy, and like these parts of Japan and Italy and so forth. Norah.
No, go on.
Yeah, no, but I believe that is the case. I think there is
the
research
playbook.
to
Talk
say
about the
that
playbook.
Yes, I think so. I just have such empathy with what you're saying, and there's an absolute playbook in place, a corporate playbook in place, and maybe what I say that is new or different to the playbook is, I think that no one wakes up in the morning saying, "I can't wait to make another child obese." You know, or I can't wait to make another 46-year-old dependent on daily alcohol consumption. Like no one's doing that. So I think that so they're not engaging so much in kind of health washing and these kind of nefarious acts like a kind of puppeteer, but rather they're engaged in something that's much more problematic, which is health wishing. So I know a lot of people who work in these industries, and they're kind of little attempts at food reformulation or reducing packaging or community-sponsored initiatives is kind of giving with one hand while taking away with the other. And we don't see the two happening together. We're just so laser-focused on the giving. And all those people who work in those businesses go, I hope this is enough to kind of slingshot us out of the kind of problems that we're causing. So in terms of kind of what can I do, the first thing that I was saying, I have had to learn this a lot, is that the idea of you as an individual consumer is a construct from the industry, and alienation is so profound in us all. This kind of thing of kind of, what the fuck am I going to cook? And it's 6 o'clock and I hate them so much. And you're there doing, and that is the most alienating time of the day, isn't it? Because you're just on your own and you're in the battle. And I think what I try all the time to do is avoid the hypocrite's trap. And I think too many people in Ireland are deep within the hypocrite's trap. And that means that we all think that we have to be as pure as the driven snow in order to critique what is going on or to bear witness to what is going on. So, we're producing too much meat and dairy, and I say that as someone who eats meat and dairy. We have a massive problem with so much of our supply going into a kind of the bottom half of the food value chain, like ultra-processing, etc. And I eat crap food all the time. And I smoke, and I do all of these things, and then I go into other rooms and I say the opposite. And that is okay. And because we have to think of ourselves as pure as the driven snow, that creates this big division in us. And you should embrace the fact that you are a hypocrite, because that is the only way in which we're going to move the system forward. Yeah. So embrace it. I'm a hypocrite.
Ruth, one hypocrite to another, did you want to jump in on something there?
No, I think that,
no.
No, that's okay.
You mentioned, we should say the quiet thing out loud about the overconsumption of meat and dairy, and particularly meat. And there was, here's an example of something that I just think, to me, it really kind of represented the dissonance in our collective discussion, right? And it happened in September 2023, so 2 years ago. So the then head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Laura Burke, or one of her team, I'm sure it wasn't her personally, issued a pretty innocuous tweet saying things like, don't waste so much food, don't waste so much meat, for example, because the figures are we dispose about 10% of our meat. And then she said, cut your meat consumption slowly, right? And be more adventurous with vegetables. I don't know what that means. But now, part of the driver for that was a landmark report in 2019 called Food and the Anthropocene, which was commissioned by The Lancet. And it's a really significant piece of work. You know, they grasp the mettle of just sort of kind of looking what a future-proofed diet for us will look like. And one of their conclusions is that we just need to kind of cut meat consumption, and particularly beef, by about 50% globally. And if we do that, there's just an extraordinary upside to that across every metric you could imagine, right? And it just seems, that is an inevitable part of our future, and it is an inevitable part of the future of Irish agriculture. But when this tweet was put up, I mean, it precipitated what you could only call hyperventilating, right, from the farm organisations, from the IFA and the Irish, sheep and ICF. Yes, thank you. And they were like saying, you know, we don't need an EPA man to tell us to eat meat. In the first instance, it was a woman, right? And you know, what they were proposing was entirely, you know, moderate and part of the adult discussion that we have to have collectively, farmers, consumers, citizens, all of us together. And the tweet was taken down. Now, how does that happen? You know, the EPA is a state-funded agency. Where was the robust, where was a minister getting out in front of that and having the EPA's back, right? And what the EPA said at the time, they said, oh, we will take it down in the interests of a very considered debate about this going forward. The debate has never materialized. It just kind of got spiked, you know. And like, each of us could cite an example of that, but that, to me, that tells me that we're kind of nowhere in terms of where our discussion needs to be. Does anybody disagree with that position? Would anybody like to challenge where we're coming from? You'll still get your little treat. Are other comments? Yes, lots of hands, fantastic. It's like an auction that takes a long time to get going. So about halfway up, this lady was first, halfway up that lady, and then a gentleman, that there, and then this guy here, and we'll see how far we get in terms of time.
And maybe this guy.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we don't know. I'm not sure that we can change things so much as consumers, more as voters. Yeah. Because I think, after I read the ultra-processed people book, I realized I need to start thinking of food companies like I think of tobacco companies. They are not there for the good of our health. They are there only to make profit, and they will do anything that they are legally allowed to do, sometimes not what they're legally allowed to do, to make a profit. So the only way and they're so big, their profits are more than the incomes of some small countries, that government has to be really strong against them to protect our interests. So the biggest power we have is our voters. You know, it's very well meaning that we go in and try and not take as much packaging and that kind of thing, but ultimately, you know, only what affects their profits is what makes them tick. And we can only make them do something that affects their profits by government.
Thank you. And then a gentleman just down there. And while the mic is coming to that gentleman, as to your point, who would you talk to? Like, do the parties have spokespeople on food, is a question, because I don't think they do currently, but they need to.
Do they?
Yeah, I just want to disclose I have a bag of potato in my bag, and I got a ready meal from Tesco because I'm going to another talk later, so... If someone sees me outside, please don't throw anything.
Turn your life around. Oh my God.
But it actually echoes the point that other person made earlier on. I think, like, in this country, right, farmers are held hostage by industry, right? Yeah. So, and I think they all answer to the Department of Agriculture. Food industry isn't put in the same bucket as maybe pharmaceuticals or heavy chemicals or things, but really that's where it should be. Yeah. Like, the Department of Agriculture should be farmers' backs and let industry be the industry's backs. Yes. And if we support farmers, and farmers do what they do because it's the only way they can get their product sold, because of the way the system is set up, they actually have a Stockholm syndrome. They will fight consumers who don't want packaging or want healthier food or whatever else because there's a gun to their head from industry. So, like, I think the pressure I'd be saying to my local TD is that we need to divorce the food industry from agriculture completely, get them on the other side of the table where they don't have a gun pointed at the farmers under the table.
Really?
Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah. No, let's go
okay.
on. Let's just have
We're going to respond to these really incisive contributions. You look like a cheese and onion man yourself. There was another hand over here, and then I think we had one down here and one down here. Thank you.
How's it going? I don't know, multiple thoughts racing through my mind. I've been advising government for maybe the last 20 years on policy, more so on the energy side than the energy and climate rather than the food. There's obvious interactions when you mention Laura Burke's point about methane emissions. So in policy advice, everything is about numbers and generally everything is about money, and it goes back to the previous point about how do you can only change things that you can measure, and generally only measure things in money. We need to get far better at measuring things in other numbers, other units. So I don't know how you measure calories and the mineral density of a meal per acre, and it's just dollars per hectare generally. But my 2 points, we need to measure things in other units other than money, and my point about Laura Burke, there's some really insidious things go on within Irish universities. I had a really respected colleague getting annoyed about this, who works in energy and climate, and the interactions on methane emissions interact with universities that are funded by Teagasc and research, not just Teagasc, but universities in the southwest. And she was just told to shut up by her individual, the dean and the professor of the university, really quietly in the background. This stuff should not be touching, tenured academics, because it's data-driven, it's the truth. But profit still leans in. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like we missed somebody at the back. Is it that gentleman there? I think so. He's got very long arms, so
Still need to do our
just helpful.
Oh yeah, just let it.
Thank you. I've recently visited Belfast, Cork and Limerick, and they have large indoor markets that support organic and crafts from the area. My question is, where is Galway's large indoor market?
Yeah. There's always indoor market.
Indoor market.
Yeah, like we don't have a food market.
I think this lady here, I'll be never forgiven if we don't come to her, and then I think we're going to take it back and try and wrap it up. Hi.
Are we on?
You're on.
Cool. So forgive my hypocrisy, but I have actually just driven from Moy Hill, if you know Fergal, who runs that farm. Yeah, I'm Australian, clearly, not Irish. But I've actually been travelling around Ireland, and I've just been in County Clare for the last few days speaking with producers and food systems, food sovereignty experts from grassroots organisations. I work with a grassroots food sovereignty educational organisation from a bunch of different people from around the world.
What's it called?
It's called Permaqueer. And we're a queer and First Nations-led organisation that supports people from a grassroots level to learn more about food systems and learn more and really beat these bigger organisations at their own game of making food systems and food sovereignty fun and cool and exciting for young people. And so I've just been at Common Knowledge, if you know that organisation, for the last few days, and they are incredible. Like, they offer so many solutions to people in this land. I'm so nervous. Sorry if my voice is shaking. But they offer so many solutions, and I've been speaking with the leaders in that organisation about the kinds of food solutions that they offer and that kind of thing. And I think personally, like, such an important part of food sovereignty and creating culturally accessible and reasonable and exciting food alternatives for us is beating these marketing groups at their own game and creating storytelling and cultivating longing on whatever level we can. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much for all of your contributions, and we could keep going, but we're going to bring proceedings to a close. So it is kind of asymmetric warfare, you know, but there are lots of things happening and practice that we can see both in Ireland and elsewhere that we really need to be aware of. Ruth, tell us about some of the things that give you cause for optimism about how we're going to tackle this.
Yeah, good. Well, the last contributor actually was a perfect segue onto that. I do get it, like I get a lot of personal kind of optimism and motivation from like the food sovereignty movement and the people that I work with in that movement in Ireland. So I'm on the board of Talamh Bio with Fergal from Wayhill Farm, and Talamh Bio it's a farmer-led organisation, but it's open to citizens as well to join. And you know, farmers and citizens really need to unite and realise that like our interests are the same, and like we just such insightful contributions there from the audience, right? But like you know, farmers are really they are really so, like, especially the big farming organisations, like so tied in with big industry, and farmers are so misrepresented. And this narrative is being built up all the time that it's environmentalists versus farmers, and that farmers and citizens don't have the same interests because the farmers have been taught to repeat this mantra: people don't want to pay more for food, all people want is cheap food, and that means we continue producing the way that we're producing. So farmers and citizens need to unite. Talamh Bio they're getting stronger and stronger, and they're getting more focused on the kind of policy asks and stuff like that. And so, you know, we think, and people should look at them. And, you know, we talked a little bit about relocalizing food systems, and, you know, I've said, you know, you don't have as much control as you think you do in terms of voting with your fork. You need to vote with your vote. But if you can find those kind of grassroots, kind of community level initiatives, absolutely, you know, that's where you should kind of go to support them. But ones that also ideally provide access for people who have least access to good food. It's not really, I mean, farmers markets are great and they're important, and they're a really important route to market for people like Fergal and Wayhill Farm who supply his community directly, you know. But the attitude towards people who are in food poverty is, let's like take the waste from the industrial food system, from supermarkets, and channel it into redistribution to food banks and give people the shit that no one else wants to eat, you know, because they're poor. It's totally unacceptable. But these community-led kind of grassroots initiatives are appearing who are trying to provide food justice with kind of access. So, you know, seek those out. But I suppose to come to kind of, and then people really kind of want to know, what can we do? We do need policy. Like, I hope that's really clear from what we've said. You know, we need policy. But how the hell do we get there, you know? And how do we get there with, you know, in a country that's so heavily invested in continuing to produce meat and dairy and producing baby formula, and, you know, and producing a lot of the components for ultra-processed foods here in Ireland, all of that. What I would love ultimately would be that we would have this national food policy, a vision for like the outcomes we want from our food system. But how do we get there? I think we're at least a decade away from kind of being able to produce anything that would serve us as citizens, because we're not having the conversations yet. So we need to start having big, challenging conversations around food. And we need to be bringing everyone to the table, except not everyone, not the industry. No. This multi-stakeholder approach globally has become the process through which policy is made. It's the accepted process. It's wrong. In my view, industry should not be at the table until they're needed to you know, provide the solution. They shouldn't be there when the policy agenda is being formed, and they shouldn't be there when the policy is being formed. So what we need is for it to become, like, for this to become an election issue, you know, for food to become an election issue. How do we get there? We need to keep having these conversations. We need to think critically. Like I said, food education is not the answer. I really believe food education has a huge role. It's really important. But what we actually need, like Norah intimated, is like critical thinking. We need to be really, really critiquing things, and we need to be asking really big questions. And then when our politicians come back around looking for their vote, we need to, you know, we need to be saying to them, like, we don't want this generation to die younger than their parents did, and the food they're eating is killing them, and like our kids will be dying from the food they're eating because they are getting more obese, they're getting diabetes, they're getting cardiovascular disease, etc., and we're killing, you know, the planet at the same time. So make this a big issue, talk about it as much as you possibly bloody well can, and, you know, be really critical.
Great. I think Ruth has, Ruth had the conch. She's eaten our lunch.
No, go on, say something.
No, we're out of time. But the only thing, actually, Oisin, could you put Nora's slides back on? Because we just want to put those reading recommendations up. We're going to do the Ezra Klein thing of 3 book recommendations or something to listen to.
That's
to me, the thing is not to fall prey to a kind of defeatism about this. You know, like we're Ireland, we can't address these huge infrastructural issues. We absolutely should be so ambitious as a country around this, right? We should stand over our proposition that we are a food island, and we absolutely could be, and we should be leaders in best practice. And I think the good news is that, in a way, there's a lot going on that may not be so visible, but in our institutions, you know, where Ruth is teaching around policy in UCC, I did the same program. There's a similar program now in UCD around food systems. Nora's work in critical marketing in the business schools. The conversations are live and happening, and what we need now is the kind of force multiplier that sort of literally moves it up the food chain. So the last thing, we're going to take 30 seconds each on our book recommendations.
Okay, go.
So Eating to Extinction by Dan Saladino. It's a beautiful kind of elegiac story about, you know, foods that we are starting to lose. One of the things he talks about is our wild smoked salmon that Sally Barnes makes. Jeffrey Steengarten, it's 20 years old, he's a bit of a dinosaur, but it's just great fun for the sensuality and the pleasure, because remember, it's pleasure as well. And then lastly, Table, which is an initiative of an academic called Dr. Tara Garnett in Oxford that brings 7 or 8 different European universities together and really gets under the bonnet of all of the things that we've talked about. They have a podcast called Feed, and that's really good. You're next.
Okay, yeah, Food Fight is a new book by Stuart Gillespie that I'm reading at the moment, but if you do want to kind of delve further into this stuff, and it's much more about the global food system, but it's really about power in the system, and it's quite accessible and really well written, and it's just so revealing. Blind Boy actually talks a huge amount about food, and he's got lots of episodes that really talk about the role of colonialism in the food systems that we have now, etc. And this particular episode I picked out because it talks a little bit about the sugar industry and actually how it's kind of shaped the globe and power in the food system. And then Atallav Bio I mentioned, please do check them out. They're really like a new voice, a really important new voice in terms of representing farmers and citizens for a more just, resilient, cleaner, fairer, healthier food system. And I'm going to be really cheeky and say one more thing, which is that if you are here as a parent, like the school food program is a tangible thing that you can kick up murder about and say we need to do so much better for our children. So please do that.
Norah, your recommendations?
No, you can spend your 30 seconds talking about the School Meals programme because that is where the rubber hits the road. Dark PR by my friend and colleague Grant Ennis last year. The Lancet report on defining and conceptualising the commercial determinants of health from last year. And Nason Manny's Money Power Health podcast, which is really good.
Which Nora's going to be on.
Yes, yep. Yeah. Oh, accidentally.
That's our show. That's lunch, people.
Yes. And
thank you.
And strawberry.
Strawberry. I know, it's a surprise.
Thank you. Okay.